So Padmasambhava, yes. So there's one story that or one particular theme that I did want to build this talk on. And Vajrapriya did give the spoiler earlier that Padmasambhava did like hanging out in charnel grounds, in cremation grounds. So early on in his life, I believe I'm right in saying, according to the legend, that he accidentally kills somebody. So he gets kicked out and has to go off by himself, to everyone's great sort of chagrin and dismay. And he goes and hangs out in the charnel ground and hangs out with the Darkinis, who are these kind of, well, depending on which interpretation you look at, they're either flesh-eating demonesses or ecstatic embodiments of pure spiritual energy, or kind of poetic muses, or all of those. So apparently he hangs out in the first charnel ground he goes to and wraps himself in the clothes of the dead. So when they bring their bodies to the charnel ground, they don't bring them in nice little kind of wooden boxes with handles. They just bring them wrapped up in a bit of cotton with a bit of rice pack for the journey. So Padmasambhava, apparently he hangs out in the charnel ground and he wraps himself in their clothing, and for sustenance he eats their flesh. So there we are. There's all sorts of symbolism about that which I don't feel remotely qualified to go into, but I just thought I'd throw that in. So that's his first sojourn in a cremation ground. Yeah, and then he's already fully enlightened, according to the tradition. So he is a Nirmanakaya. He is a fully enlightened Buddha from the moment that he first appears in the world. But he realizes that beings need to see that it's important to have a master. So out of compassion for beings, he says, well, I better go and seek myself a master. So he goes and finds a legendary teacher called Manjushri Mitra. Now, Manjushri Mitra, as the name suggests, is a devotee of the Bodhisattva Manjushri with his flaming sword of wisdom. So he goes to Manjushri Mitra and he says, I want to learn these things. I want to learn these abstruse teachings, and I think they are something like the level of, the level of Vidyadhara longevity and the higher level of Vidyadhara Mahamudra. Now, I have no idea what any of that means, just in case you were wondering. Vajrapriya might, because he's clever like that. But at any rate, they're very, very high teachings. And Manjushri Mitra says, I can't teach you those. I don't think it's because he doesn't know them, but I think it's skillful means. So he says, you've got to go and see this nun who's called Kungamo. And she's actually a wisdom darkini. And she lives at a place called Sandal Grove. Yeah? Sandal Grove sounds quite nice, doesn't it? It sounds a bit like a kind of holiday resort. But surprise, surprise, it's another charnel ground. So he goes off to this charnel ground called Sandal Grove to find this wisdom darkini. Yeah. So not only is she a darkini, she's a wisdom darkini, so she is the very embodiment of complete enlightenment and unbounded energy. Yeah. So he goes to find her, and there's all sorts of weird stuff that happens en route that I haven't really got time to talk about. But he goes to the charnel ground, and charnel grounds are not pretty places to hang out, it should be said. They're not like cemeteries. I mean, some of us might enjoy sitting in cemeteries, and cemeteries tend to be well-ordered places with tidily mown grass and neatly kept tombstones with flowers and stuff on them, teddy bears, what have you. But charnel grounds, they just take the bodies there and they dump them. So they're littered with bits of bone and skulls and sort of bits of human detritus. And there are practices in the early tradition which go into graphic detail about meditating on the stages of decomposition of a corpse. So if you're really struggling with attachment, then that's where you go and that's what you do. You meditate on the decay of the body. Anyway, he's gone there and he meets this nun and he asks her for the teaching, at which point she transforms him into the seed syllable hum, so hum, which is usually equated to mind, and swallows him. And in her body, all of his obscurations are cleared, his defilements are cleared away, and he is given all of these empowerments. And then she emits him through her secret lotus. Yeah. And so he is literally, well, he is figuratively reborn. Yeah, so he is reborn as a result of this encounter. And then his adventures continue and so on. But that's a whole other story. But what interested me about this particular story was the idea that if you want to meet wisdom and if you want to be transformed, you have to go to places that are scary and dangerous. Yeah, so a charnel ground is a scary and dangerous place that is stalked by death. Yeah, it's almost as if, unless you're prepared to go to places where you will meet your deepest fears, then transformation of any real sort of any real meaning is impossible. And I'm going to explain that. I'm going to use various examples to talk about that, and refer extensively to my own experience, as one normally does with these talks. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk about four particular, I suppose, elements, four particular places that scare us, but which, if we want to be transformed, we have to go to, at least in my opinion. Okay, so the first obvious association with charnel grounds is with death, isn't it? Yeah, as I've said, they're pretty forbidding places. They're not nice places. They're full of wild animals and spirits and flesh-eating darkinies and so forth. And so bones and skulls and stuff lying scattered around the place. And compare and contrast to a funeral directors that I went to the other day, because I'm trying to become a funeral celebrant. And they took me through the whole process. So a hearse backs into a discreet little garage, and there's a ramp. And the ramp leads you into a morgue, which is all sort of very tidy. And then the body is dressed and is washed and dressed and prepared. And then he showed me the coffins, and you get these coffins with these nice little kind of material ruffs and frills in them. And I couldn't help but think at the time, well, this is all very well. I mean, it looks very nice, but the objective seems to be to make the person look as much as possible as if they're alive. And of course, they're not alive, they're dead. And all this wonderful kind of artistry and beauty that goes into the coffin, which is either going to be burnt or it's going to go in the ground where it will rot, and the body inside it will rot. So I did find myself wondering to myself, this is a funny sort of thing to do, really, isn't it? Yeah, we take death and we sanitize it, and we organize it and we regulate it, and we make sure it happens discreetly behind closed doors and with some kind of, with beautiful arrangements and so forth. Yeah. And that seems to me, that's our sort of relationship as a society with death, really. It's something which is kind of kept out of the way. But I think we also know, of course, that death is something that will come to all of us. Yeah. When I think about death, I tend to think, okay, if it has to happen, then about 30 years from now, we'll be fine, thanks. And at the time, place, and in the manner of my choosing. Yeah. So, after a long and rich life, in my bed, with my family around me, sort of pass away neatly in that kind of way. But the problem is, of course, that I cannot determine the place, time, or nature of my death, and neither can any of you. Yeah? Neither can any of you. I'm reminded of my friend Cyrena, who was an order member of about my age, a little bit older, who was living and working in Spain as a teacher. And one night, apparently, he phoned his mum before he went to bed saying he wasn't feeling very well. And he went to bed, and then he didn't turn up at work the following morning. And when they finally went round to his apartment, they found he'd just died in the night. And I found myself wondering, what must that have been like? Yeah? Was he ready? Was he prepared for his own death? Did he know it was happening when it was happening? And sometimes I lie in my bed at night, thinking my heart could just stop. It could just stop. My life could just slip through my fingers just like that. Would I be prepared? Would I be ready to face the consequences of that? And I honestly don't know that I would. And the reason this is so important is because if we don't think that we're going to die, or if we sort of make it, push it further down the road at some sort of distant and convenient time, then there's always the temptation to put things off till tomorrow. Yeah, we always think, I can do that later. Yeah, I've got this thing to do first. I've got this thing in my life to sort out, but all that meditation and study and reflection and insight, that can wait. Yeah, I've got to sort my livelihood out and get my pension sorted out and all of these things before I can do that. Yeah, but we don't know when death is going to come. Yeah, our lives aren't that predictable. So it kind of makes sense, doesn't it, that we really kind of make sure that we apply ourselves as if our life was going to be cut off at any moment, because it potentially could be. And that's a scary place to go. I know that's a scary place to go. It's a bit like trying to look at the sun. You sort of squint at it, and then you can't look any longer, and then you put it back in the box and go off and do something else. Yeah. But I have from time to time done that as an exercise. I've tried to kind of contemplate what it will be like assuming death doesn't come suddenly in some cataclysmic way, what would it be like to gradually fade away, to gradually relinquish life bit by bit? How would that be? Yeah. So I think it's a useful exercise, if albeit an uncomfortable one. Yeah? Because if we don't acknowledge the inevitability and the reality of our own death, then the temptation not to make an effort, I think, will be very, very strong. Yeah? And this is a note. All of this is a note to self. Okay, I'm sure, and I'm not sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I think it's really good to remind ourselves of these things from time to time. This is the bit where I've got to try and manoeuvre the bottle underneath my horizon. So, death is a cremation ground, as it were. The place that scares us, but the place we kind of have to go to if we want to seriously transform our lives. If we want, because that will make us get on with it, or at least that's the idea. And then the second place that I immediately thought of, the place of kind that can be a difficult and dark place that we're afraid of going, is our own mind. Yeah, the guy who I used to go on the radio, I still do, go on Radio Shropshire quite regularly on the Sunday morning show. I did one this morning, actually. I don't know if anyone heard it, on much the same theme. He used to say, there was this chap called Mike George who used to do the Sunday breakfast show, and he used to say, "You're all so calm. You're always so calm, aren't you?" That used to kind of make me laugh, because I would find myself thinking, well, in today's terms, it would be, I wasn't that calm when the 50th huge, great SUV went roaring past me, belching exhaust fumes from its tailpipes down the motorway. Yeah, literally this morning when I was coming back from the centre, I was cycling around the roundabout at near my home in Frankwell, and a car pulled up a bit too close behind me. And I thought, oh, that's a bit unsafe. And then part of me kind of went, come on then, come on. Come and have a piece of me if you want. And it was almost literally like that. And another part of me went, oh, no, hang on. No, you can't be like that. Yeah. And it's possible, I find, if you're not careful, to live your life in a kind of constant simmering state of medium to high dudgeon. Yeah. And I've had plenty of opportunities for that. So, I don't know, round about the whole kind of Brexit thing, and then, all sorts of things that get on my goat when I see politicians going on the telly and not answering the question for the 50th time. And yeah, so my latest bugbear is the 4x4, all of these massive, great big, the tanks that people drive around the place. And the one that gets me most is the Land Rover Evoque. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the Land Rover Evoque. It's built like a tank, right? And the only thing that it evokes for me is a mixture of incomprehension, incredulity, disgust and despair, I'm afraid. So I have to work very hard to a sense of simmering resentment. How can people buy these things? How can they be allowed to sell them? How can they be allowed to advertise them? Okay, I jest a bit, but you get the point. There is, I think, in my being, and probably in the beings of most of us, there are areas of darkness. There are areas of kind of outrage. There are sort of moral deficiencies. There's darkness that we don't want to look at. Yeah, we like to think that we're nice. We're nice people. Yeah, I'm a nice person, and you're all nice people. Yeah, we're all lotuses. We're all lotuses. But as a Bayanara's t-shirt says, if there was no mud, there would be no lotus. Yeah, the lotuses grow out of the muck and the darkness and the kind of, all of the things you don't want to look at. Yeah. So if we want to really become lotuses, we have to go down there. That's the ground where we have to start. Yeah, and this is so important. To be aware of this stuff is so important, because if we're not aware of the darkness in us, we're not aware of those kind of unpleasant sides of us that we don't like, then how will we ever transform them? We could go through life kidding ourselves, or shying away from the darkness and the difficulty, or worse still, blaming people and circumstances for it. Yeah, well, that makes me angry. Yeah, or that how can they, that sort of thing. So blaming other people and blaming circumstances for our own negative mental states. And bad news, of course, is that we are the only people responsible for our negative mental states at the end of the day is us. Yeah. So we have to be prepared to go there. If we're not prepared to go there, then there's no possibility of transformation. And without transformation of our mental states, there is no possibility of transcendence, no possibility of wisdom. And in the order, we have this practice of confession. So not only do you acknowledge your own, the tawdry, as I've sometimes described, the tawdry sides of my own being, you know, the kind of darknesses, the indignation, the hatred that can be there, but you share it with other people. You share it with other people, secure in the knowledge that the people that you're sharing it with will receive your darkness with love. They will hold it with compassion and understanding and patience. And we have to learn to do the same, of course, with our own darkness and with the darkness of other people. So the last thing you want to do is acknowledge that you've had an evil thought or a murderous thought. I may be exaggerating. Sometimes I find that I do have thoughts which are not that short of murderous. Okay? You have to be able to hold those, and you have to be able to sort of understand, you know, give them space and kind of sort of accept them as being part of you, and realizing that they hold energy that can be liberated. So there's a lot of energy wrapped up in our darkness, in our unskillfulness. But if we fully acknowledge it, and if we practice, and if we work with our meditation, and if we share our lives, that energy can be liberated and transformed. Yeah. So that's one of the points behind the whole practice of confession. So particularly for those of you who are in the order, or those of you who are training to join the order, particularly, this is a practice that's worth looking at. Yeah, dragging out your dirty laundry and sharing it with your brothers and sisters in the order and in the ordination process, and seeing the transformational effect of that. Yeah, and metta, okay, remembering to practice metta. Yeah, it's been something of a revelation for me leading these early morning sits. Every other day we do the metta bhavana. It feels a bit ridiculous for somebody who's been in the order for 19 years to suddenly realise that if you do the metta bhavana every other day, it actually makes quite a big difference. But there we are. I am where I am, you know, and I have been where I have been. But highly recommended. Highly recommended. So there's the going to the places that scare you includes going into the recesses and depths of your own mind. My own mind. I can't speak for your minds. Your minds may be exemplary, yeah, but my mind. Okay, so that's the internal world. And then, of course, other places that scare us, I suppose, is, well, the world. Yeah. I don't know, I suppose everyone's always said this through the generations, but the world has always been a kind of difficult and dangerous and troubling place. It just seems to me that it is a more difficult and dangerous and troubling place than I can remember. And it seems in some ways that the wheels are simply coming off. The wheels are coming off more than they have done in the past. I don't know whether that's just, you know, a particular perspective, but it does seem to be that way. So there are so many challenges, there are so many difficult areas that we are confronted with, you know, so, I don't know, right-wing populism, the coronavirus, so global pandemics and all of the restrictions that they impose on us, and climate emergency. So one of the issues of the modern world that most exercises me. Yeah. And it's tempting to sort of go, it's too much, it's too big, I can't go there. I'll just get on with my practice in my life, in my kind of Sangha, with my Buddhism. Yeah. But the thing is, if you want to be a bodhisattva, there's two sides to that. I was on a webinar with a teacher called David Loy last week, who is a Zen teacher from Colorado who teaches something that he describes as the eco-sattva path. Yeah, so the bodhisattva path with the kind of, you know, with the climate emergency in mind. And he made the obvious but telling point that our practice runs on two tracks. Yeah, so there's the internal work of transformation. There's our meditation practice. There's our devotional practice, our study, our friendships, everything we do here. And on the other side of that, there's the way that practice manifests in the world. Yeah? So we're aspiring to develop wisdom and compassion. Yeah, and compassion we can't really sort of allow our compassion to fully unfold unless we are prepared to take the risk and steel ourselves to look more fully at what's happening in the world with all of its difficulties and suffering. In fact, one of the things that David said on that webinar that really kind of struck me was a bit like a punch to the gut. And he was talking particularly about the climate emergency, and he said, quite mildly and quite matter-of-factly, he said, if Buddhism doesn't have a response, if we, can't come up with a response to this issue, then maybe Buddhism isn't what the world needs. And that was like a punch to the gut, because I've invested my life in this. I've invested my life in practicing the Dharma and in building up this movement. And the idea that Buddhism might not be an adequate solution to the world's woes just really, really got me there. So what I've concluded for myself is that I simply have no choice but to engage. Yeah, and this is well known, I think, to most of you that I have followed a path of climate activism. So I've been in London. I've been part of Extinction Rebellion and so forth. And I've concluded that the way that I feel like I can most effectively sort of bring my values across in those contexts is through bearing witness. So most recently, a number of us sat outside the entrance to Downing Street and meditated. And what it was, there was a mixture of faiths. There were Christians and other faiths there as well. But I was just sitting there meditating and just bearing witness with my faith, with my practice to the woes of the world, and also hoping to be able to showcase another way of living. Showcase, that's a terribly marketing sort of word, you know what I mean? To demonstrate another way of living. Yeah. And of course, that can make you feel terribly vulnerable as well. The sort of what's involved in taking your practice away from the purely private sphere into a public dimension can be quite frightening. It can be a little bit kind of unnerving when you're sitting there like this and not knowing what can happen. But that's what I decided to do because it feels too important not to. It feels too important not to. And that may not be your thing and it may not be your cause. And I'm not saying we should all be out there waving banners, shouting, blocking roads or anything of that sort. But the point, it's more like an invitation to look at the scary things that are happening in the world and see what the compassionate response can be. What emerges as your compassionate response? How can we as a Sangha be involved in dealing with the woes of the world? It's all very well. And of course, our kind of core project remains to sort of spread the Dharma, to give people the means to work on their own minds and to move towards liberation. But faced with situations of such pressing urgency, it seems to me that more is needed as well. More is needed as well. But whatever happens, whatever you do, and this is again something that I have to watch out for, is not to get involved with causes from the kind of outrage-filled echo chamber. Yeah. So it's very easy to remain in your own echo chamber when it comes to causes. It's very easy to sort of, being a guardian reader, to sort of come at things from that particular kind of echo chamber and to go into the world with that kind of information in my mind, full of sort of outrage. But I think if you want to kind of get involved in the woes of the world and get involved in causes, then you need to try and be as objective as possible. Yeah? So what's actually the story here? What's actually true? Yeah? And then make any decisions to be involved in any kind of cause on that basis. And come from a place of metta, come from a place of concern, a place of love. Yeah? Yes. So that's just I suppose for me those are scary places. I mean, the world is a scary place, and I just feel that as Buddhists, if we're on the Bodhisattva path, then our practice can't just be private. It needs to be manifesting in the world and addressing the woes of the world in some way. At least that's my invitation. And then finally, there's the scariness of committing. Yeah. So particularly for those of us who have made the commitments of varying sorts, those of you who are committing to become Mitras today, those of us who have committed to being Mitras who have joined the order, those of us who are thinking of doing so, we're making a commitment to something, the outcome of which we cannot fully know. Yeah, so Sangha actually does say that you cannot really commit to the known. To commit to the known, if it's known, you've kind of already got it and done it. So the only thing you can really commit to is the unknown. So when you're committing to the Dharma path, you don't know where it's going to take you. You don't know what kind of effects it's going to have in your life. You don't know what the consequences are going to be. And the Dharma makes quite strong demands of us, really. Yeah? It's sort of calling on us to lead a different kind of life. So the normal sort of demands that life places, that society places on us, work hard, have a good job, earn money, spend, consume, retire, and so forth. Yeah, so having our place in society. I think the Dharma is quite subversive in certain ways because it challenges that narrative. The Dharma is calling on us to become individuals, to make our choices in life depending on our convictions, independence upon our ethical convictions, independence upon our awareness, independence upon our understanding of the Dharma. Yeah, and that's a hard thing to do because so much is stacked against it in the world and its values. And I find myself still doing battle with those values. Yeah. So sometimes I look at, the privilege I've been given, so the privilege of my education, for instance, and sometimes the thought arises that what have you made of that? Yeah, look at you. You're not exactly a kind of high achiever. You're not like a high earning captain of industry or anything of that sort. Yeah, what have you made of yourself? And so those kind of views are really kind of quite, well, for me at least. Again, I can only really speak for me. Yeah, those views are strong and they're very difficult to uproot. Yeah, so it takes determination and persistence and courage to face them down and to sort of be true to ourselves and to be true to the Dharma, to be true to the path we've taken, which in many ways is taking us in a direction which is diametrically opposed to the one that society has laid out for us. So a path of renunciation, yeah? A path of moving away from what society expects rather than moving towards us, a path of standing on our own 2 feet ethically, a path of knowing our own minds, a path of moving towards liberation on our own terms and on the terms of the Dharma rather than the terms that society dictates. Yeah? So don't be in any doubt about what you're taking on. Yeah? You're joining a community, you're nailing your colours to the mast in the full knowledge that you don't necessarily know where it's going to take you. It might not always make you popular. It might cause, your friends and your family may not understand what you're doing. Society won't understand what you're doing. Yeah? But that's when we need the Sangha. That's when we need like-minded people. That's why we have this, and the beauty of this, and the beauty of the communication that we join, the understandings that we share. Yeah. So I've outlined some areas in which we have, I think, in my view, we have to go to difficult places and look at scary things if we want to transform our lives. Yeah? But I did want to end with that note of uplift, that we're doing it together. We're doing it with people who understand. We're doing it with the Sangha, and there are many like-minded people who are embarked on the same path of transformation, whom we can trust. We can entrust them with our concerns and our secrets and our ethical transgressions. We can speak openly and honestly. We can share ourselves and we can share our journey. Yeah? And if we can do that, then I think that we can go to the places that frighten us and we can come through the other side with, who knows, with our love and compassion even enhanced. And that way is the path to wisdom. And that's, I didn't think of an ending, I suppose that's the end. That's what I wanted to say. So, I haven't really thought of a question specifically, But I suppose we could go into breakout rooms in a sense of, in a way, of course, you can just talk about whatever you like, but, you know, maybe what are the places that scare you in the Dharma life? You know, do you see areas, do you see places that you are reluctant to go? Yeah, that you feel that are important to address. Yeah, does this language of kind of the cremation ground mean anything to you? What are your cremation grounds? Yeah. Where do you see the difficulties?